Okay, we are now live now to Mr. Riaz.
Thank you very much. And another webinar from Alif Technology and State Bank of Pakistan on banking issues. And I think today's topic is artificial intelligence used in the banking, which is actually one of the very changing. And we are actually waiting to hear from the speakers about their experiences and the practices going on. I think artificial intelligence has gone a long way now with a lot of other technologies which are coming in. And initially, it started with only voice recognition, which probably was Alexa and Siri, but now it has expanded a lot, and there is a lot of technology coming in. One of the common use in the banks now is the chat box, in which the chatbot they're using a lot of artificial intelligence to keep on recognizing and keep on improving themselves till the time they actually require a user. So looking forward for listening with everybody, and thank you, Asif and Dr. Farooq and all the speakers to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. To Ashfaq Bhai.
Let me just introduce Mr. Ashfaq Tola Sahab.
Yes.
He is basically the Vice President of Institute of Chartered Accountant Pakistan. Actually, Mr. Asif didn't bother to introduce him because he's a very well-known figure in Pakistan. Everybody knows already.
Not only in Pakistan, in Middle East also, Mr.
Yes,
Ashfaq Tola, he doesn't need, I think, introduction or something like that. He's a very well-known person. And
yes.
He's the president of Tola Associates, and he has been advisor for Tax Reform Committee for Government of Pakistan. To you, Ashfaq.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Riaz Bhai, Asif Zaman Saab, Dr. Farooq, and what the speakers. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is an honor for me that I've been invited to speak a few words about artificial intelligence and its role in the banking sector, and in presence of being hosted by State Bank of Pakistan and Alif Technology. Initially, when Alif Technology was made, I was part of it, and still I'm a part of it. When Asif is there, I'm there. And they are hosting a webinar with Riaz. By that means, I am a part and a family of that. So, nonetheless, artificial intelligence is gaining momentum in all walks of life, and now banking is obviously using it to the optimum. As Riaz Bhai has rightly said, that it started with the voice recognition, and now increasing its role. I think we at ICAP have also developed a unique course for the members as well. It is also include, a portion of it is also include artificial intelligence. So it is a 3-module program, and gradually we will trickle it down for the students as well. But in the meantime, we will start. It is going to be a very good program for the members, and obviously, when the knowledge will spread, these members will obviously go working in the banking and technology and rest of the industry. Obviously, they will also gain momentum and implement this artificial intelligence technology. Obviously, they will speed up their work and put their socks. I think Asif, credit goes to you for keeping members continuously engaged in these CPD activities. Riaz Bhai, thankful to you for your able support, and hopefully Dr. Farooq, a very renowned Islamic Bitcoin or maybe a scholar of cryptocurrency and these computer-related issues. I think he's also second to none. Congratulations to all the speakers for their role, and thank you very much. I've got another meeting to attend at ICAP. So from my side, Pakistan Zindabad and Alif Technology and Ibak, all the prayers for success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ashfaq Bhai, for your kind words. And Hi, Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to Alif Technologies e-learning series. At Alif Technology, we always try to bring for our participant discussion on the latest technology updates and trend around the globe. Alif Technology and NEABAF today is conducting this webinar on artificial intelligence in banking. Banking is necessary, but banks are not. It's a heavily used but timely code, which wherever you see the trend is going on, banks must be able to adopt and continuously bring new proposition and new product to the market. However, they are often hindered by their legacy system, preventing them from moving quickly. Disruption in creating opportunities and challenges for global banks. Harassing cognitive technology with artificial intelligence brings the advantage of digitalization to bank and help them to meet the competition posed by the fintech players. Artificial intelligence is the future as it brings the power of advanced analytical to the industry. For example, AI algorithm accomplish anti-money laundering activities in few seconds, which otherwise takes hours and days. Artificial intelligence also enable banks to manage huge volume of data at records and to space to drive valuable insight from it. Features such as IA boards, digital payment advisor, biometric fraud detection mechanism lead to higher quality of service for a wider customer base. All this translate into increased revenue and reduce costs and boost profit in profits. In this webinar, world-class experts will be sharing their insight and discuss issues and challenges facing the IA in the banking industry. I thank all our esteemed speaker for joining us, and our knowledge and industry partner for making this happen. This webinar is jointly hosted by Alif Technologies and NEABAF, State Bank of Pakistan, and our partner for this webinar are Institute of Cost and Management of Pakistan, the University of Lahore, and Alhamd Academy. The moderator of this program will be Dr. Farooq Habib, MD and co-founder of Alif Technology. To you, Dr. Farooq.
Thank you so much, Mr. Asif, and thank you so much for the introductory remarks. And I would like to thank also Mr. Riaz Shunara, MD of NEABAF, and also Mr. Ashfaq Tola Sahab for welcoming remarks. So I think that we should move on to our speakers. So we have a very good line of speakers for today, and they are all involved in artificial intelligence, and they have a very vast experience. And I hope that it would be a very interactive session. So just to give you one the scheme and the theme of the scheme of this of today's program and agenda. So like we have like 3 speakers and 3 presentations also, and these 3 presentations, each speaker will be given 20 minutes each. And after that, inshallah, we will start our panel discussion, which is open Q&A session. So if you have any question, so you can wait basically until the panel discussion or the Q&A session, and then we will have ample time for that Q&A session, so that don't worry about your answers, actually get answers. And also one more thing is that, like, if you have any relevant question regarding the presentation or any specific topic under AI in banking, so please ask to do so. You can do this by raising your hand, so that like we will be able to allow you to directly ask the question in audio form, or you can type in your question in the Q&A session section only, so that like we can pick up your questions from there, and then our panelists can answer those questions appropriately and accordingly. So please do not post your question in the chat box, because chat box is for a general talk and other housekeeping services. For example, like if you have any problem with the voice or for audio or video or anything like that, so then you can basically put your comments over there in the chat box. With that, so let's start with our first speaker. Let me introduce you Dr. Muhammad Nasser. He is joining us from USA. Dr. Muhammad Nasser is the Senior Consultant of Artificial Intelligence in Nash FinTech X, which is a FinTech consulting and rating firm based in Luxembourg. He has worked as the assistant professor of computer science at the American University of Beirut since 2016. Before joining AUB, American University of Beirut, he was a postdoc fellow at the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at Qatar University. Dr. Nasser received his research master's degree, DEA, in computer science in 2005 and the PhD degree in 2009, both from University of Lorraine, France. He has worked as an expert research engineer at INRIA Nancy, France from 2009 to 2010, and Ericsson in Ireland in 2011. His research interests are cybersecurity and machine learning. So with this, we are very keen and looking forward to his presentation, and we are very much excited. Over to you, Dr. Mohammed Nasser.
Thank you, Dr. Farouk, for the nice introduction. So I should share my screen, right? Let me share. Okay, great.
Yes,
so,
this is visible. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, of course, the title of my talk is Understanding AI. So I'm no expert in banking, but we said that maybe giving some overview of the history of AI and the main concepts in AI may help the discussion later about applications of AI in banking. So as an introduction, I would say that inventors have long dreamed of creating machines that think. This was a big dream, historical dream. Today, AI is a thriving field with many practical applications and very active research topics. The field rapidly tackled and solved problems that are intellectually difficult for humans, for human beings, but relatively straightforward for computers. So when we started with AI, it was very easy to tackle computational problems, like problems which are based on mathematical rules. But it was a bit difficult to tackle problems that look very intuitive for humans. Like, for example, take a decision in everyday life. The true challenge to artificial intelligence proved not to be playing chess, for example, but to be solving the tasks that are very easy for people to perform, but they are very hard to describe formally. For example, recognizing the face image of a friend in a crowd, or recognizing spoken words. This knowledge is very intuitive for us as humans, but it proved to be very challenging for machines and for artificial intelligence. So of course, computer versus a human, if you want to do this comparison, we can say that computers were very good. Like 1997, IBM's Deep Blue chess playing system defeated the world champion at the time, Garry Kasparov. But of course, for computers, chess is a very simple word. Maybe the Go game is much more, has much more possibilities, but even recently the AlphaGo algorithm was able to defeat the world champion in the Go game. Okay, but where humans is beating computers is like in a person's everyday life. This requires an immense amount of knowledge, how to talk to people, how to get everyday's life going on. This is an immense amount of knowledge which is kind of abstracted in the human mind. Much of this knowledge is subjective, it's intuitive, it's hard to describe in formal terms. So computers need to capture the same knowledge in order to behave in an intelligent way. So historically, if you want to describe the AI approaches, like what is the model that is more convenient to AI systems, we had 4 different phases or 4 different epochs. So we started by trying to make systems that act like humans. So we can mention Turing's test here. And then the next wave was systems that think like humans. So this is the cognitive science wave. And the third wave was the systems that think rationally. So basic on logical rules, on logic rules. And we discovered that this is not always possible or feasible. The word is not 100% logic. There is a lot of uncertainty in the word. And finally, the prominent approach to, today for AI is systems that act rationally. So I will talk a little bit about each approach. So for example, act like humans, we can mention the Turing test in 1950. So the question asked by Turing, which is one of the most famous computer scientists through the history, is can machines think? This is the basic question. Can machines do thinking? Can they behave intelligently? And this led to a game called the imitation game. So there is a curtain and there is a human interrogator. And behind the curtain, you have a human, maybe a human and maybe an AI system. And the human interrogator has to decide if the person who is talking to him through the curtain is really a real person, a real human being, or is just an AI system. So here, to prove that you are a human, you need to know natural language processing, NLP, you need to know knowledge representation. The test has also voice test and speech test, so automated reasoning, machine learning, computer vision, robotics, all this is kind of integrated of the Turing test. Of course, today's Turing test, we can see it, for example, in the web. When you want to access a website, there is a CAPTCHA, and the CAPTCHA tries to distinguish if you are really a robot, kind of a crawler program that's trying to visit the site or just a human being visiting the site. Okay, not to confound with Turing machine. Turing machine is another big invention of Turing, but Turing machine was about the basics of computational science and not about artificial intelligence. The second wave is like think like a human. So here our focus was about mimicking or imitating the human brain. So we kind of forgot a little bit that we need to achieve some goals, and we tried to replicate the human brain. Of course, this will not work 100%. Okay, so it requires scientific theories of the internal activities of the human brain. This is a domain which is not completely discovered yet. And for this AI philosophy, it's not important to solve the problem as much as it's important to solve it like humans do, like the human brain would do. Okay, so this is continue to be one trend in AI. Cognitive science and AI continue to fertilize each other, most notably ideas from computer vision, how the human computer vision system works, are integrated in AI computer vision. So the third approach was to think rationally, so based on rules and based on logic and based on knowledge representation. So we have a knowledge base and we have a lot of statements, and the statements are either true or false, and we have to reason about statements in a formal language. But of course, this doesn't work 100% as well. Because not all the human knowledge can be represented in logical inference rules, right? So for instance, Psych, in 1984, this system failed to understand a very basic story about a person named Fred shaving in the morning. Okay, so the reasoning was that people do not have electrical parts, but Fred was shaving, so he was holding an electric razor. And this entity, this new entity, Fred, while shaving, the computer could not decide if it's really a human or it's something else. So Psych was asking whether Fred was still a person while he was shaving. So yeah, true and false, describing the world in terms of true or false could be problematic. This is why fuzzy logic was a big thing when it was first proposed. And later on, we had to consider the uncertainty of the world. So the last approach, which is really the approach which is used today, is to act rationally. And this is the approach of having AI agents, like, for example, an AI chatbot, as you mentioned. A rational agent is the one that acts as to achieve the best outcome. So we are goal-oriented here. When there is uncertainty, we don't have guarantees, but we try to achieve, in average, the best outcome. So the best expected outcome. Okay, so we say we have to take this decision. We don't guarantee the decision will lead to the best outcome, but in average if each time you are in this situation, you take this decision, you take this action, at the long run, you will be doing well. This is a little bit similar to what we humans do in everyday life. Okay, so of course, one part of acting rationally is based on logic and thinking rules, but sometimes there is no provably best thing to do, but at the same time, there is something that must be done. Okay, most of the time, we as humans, we do reflex actions, right? So we recognize an image or recognize that this is an apple and this is a banana without recurring to logic, without recurring to a formal process of thinking about why this is a banana, why this is an apple. Is it because it's like a sphere? Is it because the color is red and so on? We don't do this. We just have a reflex reaction. Like for example, recoiling from a hot stove. Okay, so the standard of rationality is mathematically well-defined and can be unpacked to generate agents like in reinforcement learning. The reinforcement learning agents, they are designed to achieve this expected outcome. Okay, in the same time, neural networks especially was addressing this point about reflex action. So neural networks, we don't really do logic, we don't really do reasoning, we just want an output. And the output should be that this is an apple, or this you should recoil from the stove because it's hot. Okay. So now the domain today, we can say that AI is the biggest circle here, including all the 4 approaches that I have discussed. For example, including knowledge bases. If we go into a smaller circle, we can see machine learning, and machine learning has all the machine learning algorithms, like for example, logistic regression, Bayesian networks, neural networks, and so on. Within machine learning, we have a subset called representation learning. And here we talk about autoencoders, for example. So autoencoders is taking a word, for example, and make a vector out of it. And when we can encode words into vectors, we can say, okay, that the president and Obama, let's say, for example, they are 2 very similar words because their vectors are very close in some hyperspace. So autoencoding was a big achievement in natural language processing, for example. Of course, within representation learning, we can mention deep learning, like multi-layer perceptrons. The hottest topic currently in terms of research. So deep learning is a particular kind of machine learning, and machine learning is a particular kind of artificial intelligence. And the goal of deep learning is this scenario, exactly. It's recoiling from a hot stove. It's a reflex reaction of intelligence. Okay. So machine learning is about extracting patterns from raw data. For example, a simple machine learning algorithm called logistic regression can determine whether to recommend cesarean delivery. Machine learning were algorithms that worked very well in real world situations, and this is why they were very successful. Another algorithm that we use every day in our inbox, in our mailboxes, is a naive Bayesian who can separate spam email from legitimate email. The performance of these simple machine learning algorithms heavily depends on the representation. So a very important question in AI today is the representation of the data. So I can give you a very simple example about the representation. Here, for example, okay, so let's say we want to separate the green triangles from the blue spheres. The representation of the data, for example, if you represent it as Cartesian coordinates, it's very difficult to separate it with one line. You need kind of a circle here, right, to separate them. While if we use polar coordinates, which means the radius and the theta angle, it will be very simple to separate the 2 classes of the data by drawing a single line. Okay, so representations matter. Representation is a very important topic in AI. One word about deep learning. Deep learning is similar to machine learning, is learning from experience, is understanding the world in terms of a hierarchy of concepts, and each concept defined in terms of its relation to simpler concept. For example, if you want to represent an image, The image is based on pixels, and the small pixels can be gathered to form some very basic shapes like triangles and circles and so on. And then the basic shapes can be gathered to form a car or a tree or something else. So this idea really is the idea of deep learning. So if we draw the graph showing how these concepts are built on top of each other, the graph will be deep, which means with many, many layers. Okay, and for this reason, this approach to AI was called deep learning. Of course, features are the pieces of information that are used as input to the AI algorithms, and they are known as features. Okay. So the choice of representation, as we said, is has a very enormous effect on the performance of machine learning. For example, if we are doing natural language processing, we need to encode the words into numerical vectors in order to proceed. Okay, so a small word about AI history. We can maybe distinguish between two big schools, and this paper has really studied in a much depth how AI can be differentiated into two big schools. The first school is the symbolic school. So this is about think rationally. And the other school is the connectionist school. And this is about acting rationally. This is about the reflex, the intuition, right? So if we look at the years, at the history, we can say that the AI started as connectionist. Starting in 1940, 1950 was Turing paper was in 1948, and then Rosenblatt's perceptron was in 1957. This was one of the most important algorithms, and later on, we had no very big results because of many reasons that I will talk about. So the symbolic school has taken over for a long time. And later on, we have what we call the revenge of connectionist school, with starting with Vapnik in 1995 and support vector machines. So in support vector machines, we don't have symbols, right? It's just a mathematical problem. We're trying to find the widest highway between two sets of points. It's very mathematical description. We don't really care about symbols and about statements and about logic, playing with logic with statements. Okay, so in terms of citations, we can see that symbolic was highly cited between 1998 and 1989. Currently, starting from 2010, we see that more papers about deep learning have been cited. Even if we draw the citation network of the two schools, we can see that here is heavily connected and dense. This is the connection school. You can see Vapnik, LeCun, Hinton, and so on. Here is a symbolic school with Minsky and McCarthy and so on. Okay, so why connectionist school failed at the beginning in the history and then succeeded later on? So basically because, first of all, we didn't have enough data. So if you look back in 1950, like the IRIS dataset, this is a dataset about flowers. It has like basically the dataset size is about 100, 200 samples. This was not enough for training AI. Today, for example, 2015, we have datasets with 10 to the power 4 up to 10 to the power 9. And this is a lot of data that can be used for training. Another reason is that at the epoch in 1950 and 1960, we didn't have enough computational power. So the CPUs were not that fast. The GPUs, we didn't have any GPUs, kind of graphical processing units. And of course, today we have what we call general purpose graphical processing units, which means they're not just used for graphics, they can be used for other purposes. Of course, today we have faster internet, network connectivity, and better software infrastructure for distributed computing. So all these factors were missing in the history, and today we have them, and this is why connectionist school has taken over again. Okay, so again, if we look at, for example, the connections per neuron, for the old algorithms, for the old approaches, we have like 10, 100, 1,000. Okay, so we didn't have too much big neural network. Mostly our neural networks were in the size of the brain of a fruit fly, okay, and very far from the size of the brain of a human in terms of connections per neuron. So how many connections are going out from a neuron, and also in terms of number of neurons. Okay, so 1950, our neural networks was like 10 or 100 neurons. Today we have, I Googled it actually, the largest neural network today is about 16 million neurons. So if you compare to the human brain, it's still less than the human brain. The human brain is about 10 to the power 11 neurons. Here we have 16 times 10 to the power 9 neurons. Okay, so of course, AI today is a big topic. The connection of school and neural networks and deep learning, the inventors of this technology have won the Turing Award in 2018, Yann LeCun, Geoffrey Hinton, and Yoshua Bengio. And of course, the award was given for the conceptual and engineering breakthroughs that have made deep learning in particular a critical component of computing. So if I still have time, I will talk a few words about the types of AI and then about the challenges of AI. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, please go ahead, no problem.
Okay. So first of all, if we look at types of AI, I mean the applications are everywhere, okay? Today we have AI everywhere. Interactive AI, chatbots, smart personal assistants. We have what we call functional AI. So everything about robots and robotics. So I don't know, the simplest example is home cleaners. They can automatically clean the floor. All the IoT revolution as well. We have analytical AI, Twitter sentiment analysis, supplier risk assessment. We have a big trend in AI, which is the knowledge AI. So everything about knowledge representation encoded in some kind of ontology, and then you do questions, and the AI has to answer with good answers. So all this needs a lot of natural language processing or NLP to be very efficient. Of course, visual AI, everything about computer vision and augmented reality is also a type of AI or a big application area. Speech AI, everything about translation, text recognition, speech recognition, dubbing sometimes, speech to text conversion, text to speech conversion. This is under speech AI, I would say. Of course, you can agree or disagree with this categorization, but the basic thing here, I guess, in my opinion, is that we have AI in every and each domain. Challenges in AI, of course, the big challenges today are trustworthiness. Okay, so AI has, let's say you have an AI algorithm, it has been trained of a lot of data, it has shown good performances in the lab. Now you want to put it in a bank or you want to put it in a business. To how much extent, to what extent we can trust the AI, the decisions made by the AI. Can we trust them 100%, 90%? What's the risks? And so on. So trustworthiness, explainability. Okay, so I want to take a loan from a bank and the bank refused my loan without any explanation. So if it's based on AI algorithm, today European laws, they require the AI to explain the decision. So not just like a black box. So usually neural networks are kind of a black box. We said it's a reflex, right? So you give the input, it gives you the output. You don't understand what happened in between the neurons and how they have communicated the information. Okay, so explainability today is a big challenge. How AI can explain its decisions. Novelty detection, usually we train AI with very well-known classes, for example, in a scenario of classification. So AI, for example, can be trained with 1,000 classes of objects. Now, what happens if we have a new object or a new face or a new voice? How to deal with novelty detection here is very important. Security of AI, of course, especially in critical systems like self-driving cars or like in banking, the AI designer, the researcher or the engineer who is working on the AI can actually make a backdoor. What do I mean by a backdoor here? it can actually have some kind of input that is given to the AI. It will give him some predefined output. So this can be encoded in the algorithm. And if this person sold the AI algorithm to a bank or to any other business, later on he can provide some kind of crafted input to force the AI taking a given decision. So the security of AI here is also a very big challenge. How to vet, how to monitor AI algorithms to not have backdoors, to not have malicious intentions hidden within the parameters and the biases and the weights of the model. Self-learning AI is a big thing because currently AI, the best applications, they need what we call labeled data sets, which means every image is labeled correctly, every word is tagged correctly, and so on. So can AI do self-learning like we humans do sometimes? And finally, of course, the biggest challenge in AI remains to have AGI, or artificial general intelligence, so reaching the human level of intelligence. I don't think that currently today, if you work with chatbots, you can know that chatbots, they're not anything near humans in terms of intelligence. So today, of course, we are still very far away from AGI, but this is a big challenge for the future. Thank you very much, Dr. Farooq. That's all from my side.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nasser. It was a very wonderful and very clear presentation, and I must say that like it has actually provided the base of further developing our concepts and also discussion in AI in banking. So with that, I again thank you so much for the presentation, and now I would like to call upon our second speaker, Mr. Gopal Kiran. Gopal works as a Director, Financial Services, Southeast Asia with Deloitte, based in Malaysia. He holds more than 12 years of diversified consulting experience of working with global fortune banking, financial services, insurance, and technology companies based in the USA, Europe, Middle East, and Asia Pacific region. Gopal brings a unique expertise of digital banking, fintech, cards and payments, digital channels, mortgages, digital wallets, insurance, and capital markets. Some of the latest engagements include a digital banking license application strategy, digital channel innovation, cashless economy strategy, banking super app and shared economies, neo-banking launch strategy, 5-year transformation strategy, risk transformation, etc. He has conducted sharing sessions on latest innovations and subjects like digital banking, digital assets, payment transformation, financial inclusion, insurtech, etc., with multiple regulators in the APAC region. Gopal is a dual MBA graduate from premier business schools in USA and along with an electrical engineering background. With this, I really would like to thank first Gopal Kiran for accepting our invitation and taking out some time from his very busy schedule. So Gopal Kiran, the floor is yours. Please take on from here.
Thanks, Dr. Farooq, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. Greetings from Malaysia. So based on the introduction given, I help many of our clients in the APAC region, sometimes in Middle East and Europe, on digital strategy innovations focused on financial services space. So today in the next 15 to 20 minutes kind of a time I've allotted, I'll try to give an overview of where is the application of AI in banking space. I think as we all aware, there are so many technologies out there, but what is the beauty of AI? Where specifically in the banking value chain we see the AI is being applied, and if some bank wants us to embark on this AI journey, what should and where they should start with. And I will try to share some of the case studies of how others are doing with respect to AI in banking. So without further ado, I think there's an interesting stat which states that it takes only 35 days for a new technology to reach 50 million people these days. So that is the advent of new technologies coming up. Every other day, we see a new technology that is coming up. Some of them are useful in financial service perspective. Some of them may not be useful. So in this slide, you see a quick map of what are all the various things that are possible. Like when we talk of a digital transformation agenda for any bank per se. We look at various options they have, like we look at what kind of automation kind of technologies they should look at, how they should transform the innovation, how they should give the better experience to their customers, how we should mine the data, how do we derive insights from the data to offer innovative products or cross-sell, upsell, what kind of new connectivities to reach the rural masses or enable financial inclusion. How do we look at gamification or game-changing technologies? So these are some of the spectrum of the technologies we look at from a market perspective based on the study conducted by Gartners and all. There are two technologies that have been predicted to have a wider adoption in the next 5 to 10 years. I think many of you can guess which are those two technologies. One is the blockchain. I think we see an increasing acceptance of blockchain by all the financial institutions in the recent days. And the next technology which are predicted to have a higher adoption is the artificial intelligence. So no doubt we have seen a lot of interest of AI in the banking value chain across the various areas of the banking value chain. AI has seen a lot of interest. So moving on to the next slide, I think what is fundamentally changing is the customer perceptions. Every other day, customers wanted new things. So this put the banking or financial service players on spot, how they can bring new things to their customers, how they can increase the experience to them. These days, everything is a click of a button on your mobile phone. So how do you bring that innovation? How we can offer the next best solution for a customer? So this is where the whole industry is moving towards, and this is where the infusion of emerging technologies in your overall roadmap is quite critical. So in this, I've tried to show the typical characteristic of the customers. They wanted connected. They wanted to stay connected with the bank. They wanted to have a choice. They wanted to have the products that are relevant. They wanted to make sure they are secure in whatever the products or the banking apps they are using. And then they want everything on a click of a button or a mobile. So these are some of the characteristics of a typical customer out there. So how do you make sure your financial service player or a banking entity will tap on the needs of the customer is the real challenge and provide the utmost digital experience. So there's another interesting stat which says globally we have been influenced so much by the mobile. The stat says every 18 seconds we all tend to look at our smartphone device. So currently I'm speaking in this conference, I look at my mobile phone. So the industry, the global benchmark is every 18 seconds all of us tend to look at our smartphones or digital phones. I don't know whether we are checking emails or looking at Facebook or social media, whatever it is, but this is the kind of influence of digital technologies or the smartphones we have on our daily life. So which gives a very interesting perception or the situation of where AI has been used across the banking value chain. So if you look at, I can see based on my experience of working with multiple clients, AI can be used on the frontline area, middle office area, or the back office area. So in this slide, I've tried to highlight some of the key areas where the AI adoption is being very high. So based on the survey which Deloitte conducted last year, for some of the 200 plus banks globally, around 86% of the banks, they feel AI is a very important technology which they would like to invest in the next few years. So that shows the importance. So for example, on the specifically talking about the use cases of AI on the front line, say for marketing. So there are a few players in the market who are using AI to define the right customer segments, do some customer analytics. They would like to also use some 360 degrees profiling of our customers. Currently, we say with the existing tools we have, we claim we get 360 degrees view, but I honestly disagree. We won't have 60 degrees view or 100 degrees view. So forget about the 360 degrees view unless we have all these emerging technologies in place. So on the product side, we see many of the players or the fintech players are bringing up solutions on using AI in, say, investment portals, trading, lending, providing personal finance management, account management, product advisory. So these are some of the areas we see being used. On the sales and the relationship kind of area, we see AI has been used in automated reconciliation. How do you use AI for credit scoring, risk management? Sometimes AI has been used in KYC solutions. For example, there is one interesting player, they use AI in AML solutions. So with this AI solution, they can predict whether you're the right person doing the transaction or not. When I say you're the right person, they look at the values like how much pressure you're applying on your keyboard enter button. That also is a parameter that has been used to predict whether you're the right person doing the transaction or not. For example, the middle office on the operation side, AI has been used extensively in the process automation. I think this is where the industry is moving towards of how do we achieve the operational efficiency, increasing the sales and reducing your cost. So both the AI plus robotic process automation and plus analytics, they call it the intelligent automation. That's how the industry acronym is being used, be it in the mortgage industry or process lending or corporate systems. AI has been used extensively. On the back office, mostly on the risk servicing, it's been mostly used on fraud monitoring, early warning systems. And on the back office, like for example, on the performance management, cybersecurity, AI has been used extensively. So this is a very clear sign to see the adoption of AI across the value chain of the banking. So I've highlighted some of the key things, like you can see they highlighted the call center. In fact, some of the players here in Southeast Asia region, they use AI in the call center to predict what is the volume of calls that can come on a specific period, specific time, because of some specific seasonality. And then they can use AI to predict who is the right customer, who is the customer calling, and they can greet accordingly. And then the customer 360 degrees with respect to customer marketing. In fact, there are a few players in this side of the region. I've seen a few banking players. They use AI to predict which are the top 5 customers a contact center agent should call on a day, or the salesperson should approach them. So it goes to that level. And then from an overall domain perspective, we have seen the adoption getting very high in the retail and commercial banking, and then the wealth and the private banking space as well, and also on the debt recovery, debt collection as well. So these are the interesting areas where we see the adoption is going very high. Also, just to give some examples of who is actually using some of the case studies of which banks are using the AI. For example, JP Morgan is using the AI ML techniques for the fraud management and do the next best offer for the clients. Capital One is using for using the spend analytics. And then Goldman Sachs is using for the corporate management. DBS, the famous bank in Singapore, is using for customer interaction. Santander is using for app-based transactions. They use the speech technology, as the earlier speaker mentioned. They are applying it in Santander. HSBC is using for providing the customers with an understanding of the products. RBS is using a chatbot kind of a AI to promote their mortgage product. For example, OCBC in Singapore, they also use a similar kind of a technology to promote their mortgage product. In fact, the chatbot was very successful to sell some billions of mortgage product to their customers. So these are the real applications. It is not a myth we see in the market. This is a real application. Many of the banks are working collectively to put AI. I mean, industry is moving from having a chatbot to more advanced use cases. So the next slide is based on the survey which we did on what part of the format of how AI is being used in the respective organizations. So we see majorly AI is trying to look at how we can leverage AI as a service, how we can integrate the whole AI with the enterprise software, how we can create a different data science modeling or a financial modeling kind of a tools. So that's where the application, and then how we can automate the whole machine learning thing in some of the use cases. And then some of the other players or banks, and we see they're also looking at co-development with the partners for onboarding and for onboarding onto the AI technology. Some of them are working with the open source AI and cognitive development tools. So these are some of the areas how some people are onboarding, the banks are onboarding into the AI technology. So we classify them as the front runners or followers or the starters. Moving on to the next slide. So far we have seen what is the beauty of AI and what are the application areas in banking space and who is using it. So this slide, I'm trying to give an overview of how, if someone wants to embark on the AI journey, where does it start exactly? So we see it is a sequence of steps. It's like around 6 steps that are required for someone to onboard an AI journey. One is as a bank, you need to develop an overall AI strategy, like what kind of capabilities you have, what kind of objectives you wanted to achieve with respect to AI, what kind of use cases we wanted to apply for AI. So developing an overall enterprise level AI strategy, that is the fundamental starting point. So that the next stage, once to define the overall AI strategy, it is looking at the next level of defining the right process where we wanted to apply AI. So it is not like for the sake of doing or just for the sake of PR activity, don't infuse AI. So look at the right use case where it can solve the problems and where you can derive the benefits. So identifying the right use case, focus on value driven use cases, that is the next step. And then the fastest way is to onboard with the prototypes, pick up the right use case, aim to build a foundation and prepare a scalable deployment, and then strategically align to your objectives, like do more POCs, get your hands dirty and understanding the AI things, and then try to see if the use case is workable, and then align it to your overall objectives. And then the fourth step is to build with the confidence. I think one of the key things which I see missing in many of the AI deployments is the risk management or the compliance team is brought in at a very later stage in the overall process. So it gets very difficult if, for example, if you have built an AI solution that is very good, if you want to get a central bank approval or a regulatory approval, if you have not adhered to all the risk management things that are required to get an endorsement for this solution, so that's the tricky part. So involve your AI teams or risk or a compliance team well ahead in the whole process, so that they can guide you on the right things with respect to compliance and regulatory. And then once you see a little success with respect to POC, look at how we can take it like an enterprise solution or a corporate solution, and then it is and then bring it to a wider scale of deployment across your enterprise or your subsidiaries. Develop the right talent pool. Embark people on this new technologies innovation and transform it to the enterprise wide. And then the last step we see is to make sure you derive the sustainable outcomes and generate the right business value with respect to AI. So this 6-step methodology or the process, not necessary, it applies for any technology, not necessary for only AI, be it a blockchain also, it can apply. But what the key thing is, instead of wait and watch and not doing anything, pick up the right value-driven use case, do a POC, understand the learnings. Even if you fail, that is okay, but fail fast, try to learn faster, and try to deploy more solutions and make it as a commercial solution or derive the best business value. So this is the 6-step process if someone wants to embark on an AI journey, which we see has successfully applied across few organizations. So I think, as the previous speakers have mentioned, all these emerging technologies come with a lot of risks or the challenges. So I think what is required is how do we have the right balance with respect to innovation and the risk management or the governance kind of a thing. So as with the artificial intelligence, we see there are multiple things that needs to be considered in order to put a value-driven engagement. Like you have to make sure whatever the results or the artificial intelligence or the algorithm builds, they're fair and not biased. So we have to make sure, and then we have tried to put the systems in a robust and reliable, scalable kind of a solutions and consistent with the outcomes we need. And then privacy. At the end of the day, we need to make sure the user data is protected. We have the consumer content, and then we make sure all the cyber and digital risks practices have been taken care. So I think this is very much fundamental, since we are since we are working in a regulated environment, and make sure we are safe and secure. And then there should be a right governance, or a RASI needs to be defined, who will be responsible, accountable if there's any mishap that are happen. And then whatever the solution, whatever the technology we build needs to be transparent. Whatever the algorithms we made, someone has the knowledge to it. There should be right documentation, the attributes, the correlation between the attributes, the data sources we are using, everything, there needs to be a right documentation. So dealing with these emerging technologies come with positives, pros and cons, but how do you best balance both the pros and cons gives the real beauty of using this innovative technologies like AI. So this is a framework which we have created from a Deloitte side based on our experience of how we deal with this emerging technologies. So felt like sharing to the audience here. So with that, I take a concluding note. I don't want to take too much of time of the audience here. So I mean, of all the technologies, as I've mentioned earlier, the AI and blockchain have been predicted to have the highest adoption. And then there are real use cases of how AI can reap the benefits, be it reaching the new customers or achieving the operational efficiency or a better risk management or an AML solution. So these are the most powerful kind of use cases where AI can be applied. And I personally feel there is a lot of things that can be done with AI. So with that, I take a concluding note, and then if there's any further questions, I would be happy to answer offline, and or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Dr. Farooq and team.
Thank you so much, Gopal. It was a wonderful presentation, and I think that it was very insightful also. And definitely we have learned from this presentation, and we have already received some of the positive response and questions also. So looking forward to a very productive and lively discussion. But before that, I would like to invite our third and last speaker of this webinar, which is Mr. Asim Riaz Kaghzi. Asim Riaz Kaghzi is a high-performing, dynamic, and versatile MBA accredited IT professional with 15 years of progressive and diverse industry experience. He is a consultant at Clear Edge Technologies Incorporated in Canada. He has done foundational work in data democratization and analytics platform provisioning with end-to-end solutions that includes data pipelines, machine learning, recommendation modeling, real-time reporting, and analytics tools of Cloudera Hadoop, Apache Spark, NLP, text mining techniques, Python, and scikit-learn technologies. He has expertise in database administration and architecture, standardizing, documenting, and automating systems with specialization in Oracle technologies. Demonstrated ability to deliver high availability, scalability, high performance, well-monitored and compliant systems with complete disaster recovery solutions. So I think that with this background, we are looking for a very exciting and insightful presentation also. Mr. Asim, over to you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I would like to thank Riaz Sab for sending me invitation and referring me, and then Dr. Farooq followed up with the invitation. A little bit of disclaimer: I am by no means expert, as you have seen with other presenters. I'm a technologist. I don't hold any PhD degree, so whatever I'm going to tackle is going to be more from a technologist perspective. The topic that I was given, I will share my screen and let me know once you see my screen. Okay, so
we can see that, and if we can request you to turn on your video also, that will be great, because it gives the attendees a sense of interactiveness.
Okay, so ready to see a grizzly bear? Because I have been working from
No
home
problem.
for a long time.
No problem. Actually,
now we are talking about AI, so they are more than interested that it's not a robot talking, it's somebody person is talking that.
Very, very well said. So the thing that I would like to tackle is basically bias. When everything works, then everyone is happy, customers are happy, the organizations are happy, the regulators are happy. But if something goes wrong, then obviously we have to find out what is happening. And this is one of the things that have been touched upon in our previous discussions as well in terms of challenges. And this is what I would like to talk about when we talk about the problem statement, that what is bias. So basically, bias is AI bias is nothing different from any decision maker, as you see in any sphere of your life. So for example, if you're a hiring manager, you make certain decisions, and you make certain decisions based on your previous experiences, your own conditioning that have been inculcated on you through educational systems, so through your social pressure, through your ethnic group that you belong to, and generally speaking, the political and socioeconomic struggle that you have went through yourself. So you will do and say things in a certain fashion. As there is a, generally speaking, there is a normal saying that a judge will decide the case for if there is a dispute between a landlord and a renter. It is very highly likely for a judge to decide one way or another, depending on whether he is a landlord or a renter. And there is nothing different about AI also, because AI is written and put in place by human beings. So whatever I talk about here as bias, we are essentially talking about human beings that are putting in place the systems that are automated. The only difference is now it has a higher impact, because if you are a recruiter, then you may be affecting people who that you are hiring for your own firm. But if you create a recruitment system, that means you are going to impact a whole lot of other organizations as well, and whole lot of population that are being scrutinized through your AI hiring systems. So very first thing, there are two ways there are two aspects that you see bias playing its role, and we are going to talk about a little bit of both, and then talk about what do we do to resolve both of the aspects or paradigms. One is your cognitive bias. It's a systemic error in thinking, in terms of data processing, in terms of including or excluding a certain data set from your studies, collecting data, and also augmenting data from various sources. So everything that you see from implementation perspective can have a systemic error, just like any other human being would do. So there is nothing different, as I said. I may be repeating myself here. So just to give you an example, um, this is how we normally would get some guideline in terms of, say, if I am a manager of a development team, that means software development team, I'm I'm uh, presented with a certain guideline saying, if you have to rate one of your developers, these are the guidelines that we follow from junior developer to senior developer position. So going from critical thinking to coding, because most of the time your developer would code, and then testing is important, because the more testing you do, less of the problems will be uh, you have to rework, and then you have to work among the team members. So team work is important at certain level. But what do you normally do if you are a manager? And tell me, just raise your hands. Well, it's not physical, so I cannot count, but just think in those terms. This is how we do it. At least this is what I have been told by a lot of managers that I talk to. They go from component ranking to the overall ranking first, because you tend to dislike a person first, and then you try to figure out, how do I make sure that each component get the rankings. So I am looking at a developer who has been working for my company for last 2.5 years, and at an average, people should be promoted to the next level. And my management said that I am going to promote people who rank, say, 80 marks or higher. So I said, well, I like that person. He does a good job. So I'm going to recommend him for promotion. So I gave him 80. Now I have to obviously make up those 80 marks. So critical thinking, I said, well, he's not so good at it. So I actually put whatever he is worth. But later on, I find out that in coding, he's average, so I gave him 40. But then I quickly realized that I have to get to 80. So I actually give him testing and teamwork more points, and to make up the 80, not actually ranking the person according to the guidelines that I was given. Now multiply this particular way of dealing with your hiring, managing, and promoting people by, say, 100 managers and to 5 years. How many data points have you collected within a single division or organization? And this is a subtle way where bias creeps in, where we don't follow a certain pattern and we put our personal biases in the system. And so that means what happens is, if I now create a model that reads the data and it sees anytime a person is ranked 80%, is higher ranked and get promoted, but guess what, it will put less marks on critical thinking. Whereas we all know that as you move along the chain, your critical thinking component gets used more often than the other 3 items that I have put in on the slide. So that means it will, if a artificial intelligence system has to have been put in place, it will recommend promotions to the people who have less critical thinking capability. Now, on the positive side, this is a negative side, obviously, but on positive side, I was reading an article where Microsoft introduced a chat bot that will take inputs on Twitter and it will reply back from Microsoft side. Some people figured out that it is a learning algorithm. So that means it will, if you say something, it will come up with some answer. You say something else, it will come up with another answer, very intelligent. But then it also learns from your behavior and replies in the same fashion and same language that you are addressing the chatbot with. So a group of people came together and actually attacked the system with cuss words. And guess what? After a few hours, the chatbot started using 4-letter words. So, so where here bias had to be introduced. They did not figure out earlier on, so they had to shut down the service. And there are many other cases that we can go on and on. Some can be as benign as using cuss words, but more serious is you're recommending someone for promotion. And more serious has been a test case where we saw there was a system put in place used by judges that would recommend, based on the data and decisions of the courts, whether a person should get bail or not, or early parole in United States or not, and how likely the person who is applying for parole is likely to re-offend or not. And they have found that it would highly be biased towards white offenders, and it will recommend more parole approvals for white parole applicants versus African Americans. And that was based on the actual data that they fed into the system, even though the judge would ultimately make the decision, but the system itself was biased itself because of the data skew. Second one is the data set completeness. And I think we had some discussion about it earlier on, but I'm going to talk about it in a little bit detail. With data completeness, I mean, if it is representational, representationally correct or not. So for example, if you have outliers, normally what do? We take out outliers because they create noise for our mathematical formulas. It is bad for regularization, and our model do not tend to perform well when it comes to test data sets or evaluation data sets. So what do? We normally take away outliers. But what if the outliers are the people who are applying for credit? What if that person livelihood or next 5 years of life projection depends on the application the person has submitted to the bank for a credit? So let's see, if you have a data set like this, the beauty contest would be won something like this. But if you put a person like this and say, what's your opinion about beauty of this instance or observation when we talk about data science, then do you think she has any chance of winning? The answer is, I would say 90% plus confidence that she is going to fail. She is not going to win the beauty contest, even though we all know as human beings that she is more beautiful than this guy. So, and that is also highlighted in MIT researcher where there was she took 3 out of the box AI systems and she tried to label data, and the error rate for dark-skinned women was the highest among the among all 3 out of the box algorithm. And the reason was most of the data that started where the software companies started was ImageNet, and ImageNet was highly skewed towards Caucasian male population. Same thing happened with Amazon, where they took data from last 10 years of employment, and they saw a bias of their hiring system skewed towards men and skewed towards Caucasian population. Because in technology, in first years, most of the people who were coming out of college and applying for Amazon jobs were male and Caucasians. Later on, when other sections of population started applying for the jobs, things got changed, but they did find there was a bias in the system itself because of the data skew. So they removed the system out of and replaced it with the different system which is more human had a human interaction than the algorithmic system that they put in place. Olga is a Princeton assistant professor. She talks about a whole lot about the bias in the system, especially when you are talking about visible minorities, women especially. And according to her, the earlier portion that we talked about, the systematic error uh, uh, in human beings, debiasing is more difficult than AI, because AI, you can always take a look at it, look at the code, you can figure out the weights, and you can adjust according to the fairness policies or any other regulatory requirement that your AI is trying to break. You can adjust, and then you will be on your way. But it'll be a little bit more difficult to basically make people, debias. You cannot, uncode or, put a patch on a human mind, if you will. So where do you go from here? So the very first thing that we need to do is to understand the data set itself. Because a lot of time we look at the data, and based on data we go into probability realm, and we say what is the percentile that this person, the new application for example, is coming in, and where does it fit, where do we profile that person. Now if you have a skewed data, especially when we talk about the data that is not representational or it is historically wrong, then obviously you will have issues. So the question should be whether the data, this is how the data should be, rather than what it is. So don't take the status quo or the data that you received as your baseline. You should always look into the data and see whether it should be the way it, or it has certain other problems coming in when we were collecting data, for example. Secondly is the understand the change. So if you go like Amazon did, they put 10 years worth of data and then build the algorithm. But if you look at later years, you will find people of color, women getting into the programs in the colleges and started applying. So obviously you will see later portion of the data giving you a different view than 10 years ago. So always look for the changes that are happening. Understand the processes. Again, this is no brainer. You have to understand how the data was collected, how it was processed, and whether it is representationally correct or not. And then understand the algorithm. Understand the algorithm is a newer field. A lot of algorithms are now getting into the realm of explainability. So that means whether whatever the model that you have created, whether you can explain how it is working or not. And Dr. Nasser spoke about it as well, that you in European Union they are talking about explainability, and you cannot just say that since neural networks are black boxes, we don't know how neurons are interacting with each other. You have to understand it, and there are now major improvements in terms of explainability of your model. From the policy perspective, that was the topic. One is you have to formulate a framework. You already have, and it is not so difficult, you already have regulations. You have certain conventions that you have already signed on international basis, for example, human rights, minority rights, religious rights. And then you also have fairness policies already put in place. But you have to put some level of framework saying, for example, if it is a state bank, then regulated entities may be given a policy saying whatever the automation you are doing in your trading system, in your credit or risk profiling, also take into consideration your fairness, whatever the fairness definition may be, but at least have something in place so that the entities that are being governed by the regulation try to incorporate in their own systems and be cognizant of the fact that this can happen and that how to mitigate it. Second thing that I always ask people to do from policy perspective, whether you are hiring, managing, or promoting people, when you are creating inclusiveness, the very first thing that can be doing, this is the low hanging fruit: increase women participation. Increase women participation in employment, in decision making and policy making. All three are critical. Unless you don't do that, men are men. We don't think like women, and we are different. We are from different planets. So we have to get those half of the population involved in every sphere, at every stage, at every layer. Have marginalized population and minorities, you need to protect them. Have their presence. Make sure you have something going for them. So for example, if you are creating a branch, even though it is not artificially AI related, if you have a branch, then make sure a physically challenged person can get in and out and get the service that any other customer can get. And same is true if the person is physically challenged, apply for loan or credit card, get the same level of service and attention as any other person. Include diversity, and it can have many nuances. For example, in multicultural environments, you can talk about including people of color, people of that are talking not the national languages, but different language that you normally use. Those are diverse people, and they will always bring in new values, new way of thinking, they bring in new perspectives. And lastly is use automation and human decisions intelligently. Again, no-brainer. Try to automate the things that will help in making things more efficient, but they need to be effective as well. And do not try to incorporate or automate things that are highly susceptible to the ethics and bias aspect of automation. That will be all from my side. I'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much, Asim, for this wonderful presentation. And it was actually a very good and very interesting session. With that, we have actually completed our presentation section or session. Now we are going to move towards our panel discussion and open Q&A. I have seen a lot of questions already there. And unfortunately, what happened is like our presenters and speakers, they utilize their time by answering those questions as well. But some of them are I think I would like to have those questions for discussion in our panel discussion. And I would like to also include in this panel discussion Mr. Riaz Chunara and Ms. Alia Noor. Unfortunately, Mr. Gopal Kiran had some emergency, and he had to log off from the call and meeting because he had to attend another meeting, important meeting actually. So, but with that, I think that we already have a very good panel, and inshallah, it will be a very interactive discussion. We have seen one hand raised by Imran Yunus. If he would like to ask a question, please do so. Imran Yunus? So I have allowed you, Imran, to talk. So if you would like to ask the question directly to our panelists, please do so. I think that we are not getting any answer from Imran Yunus. So let me just go to Mr. Hamza Khan. So Hamza, you can unmute yourself and you can ask the question if you would like to. Hamza, can you unmute yourself? Okay, I think that they are facing some problems, I think. But meanwhile, I would like to ask Dr. Nasser. I think that he has already answered the question, but just for the sake of the benefit of other people, that what is the difference between self-learning and AGI? Can you please explain it?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Farouk, and thank you for the speakers. I really enjoyed all the talks. Yeah, so self-learning, it means, or what we call self-supervised learning, is learning without labels. So it means that you have raw data, you have, let's say, images of a lot of things, but you don't have labels for the image. So there is no human being who said, okay, this image is an image of an apple, this image is an image of a car, and so on. So here the problem of learning is a bit more difficult because we don't have clear classes. We need to make sense of the data. So for example, clustering is a kind of algorithm that is used in self-supervised learning. But of course, with clustering, we have a lot of technical issues that prevent very efficient learning. For example, we don't know already how many clusters we should configure. If you take the most basic clustering algorithm, which is called k-means, k-means you have to configure k. Okay? You have to know k. K is the number of the clusters, but we don't have the number of the clusters. Right? General artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence, AGI, is something much more of a big dream or science fiction. Is artificial intelligence that we see in movies. It's like AI gonna reach a level that is gonna be exactly like us human beings in terms of intelligence. So they can think for themselves, they can learn, they can, I don't know, they can have emotions. This is a big research question. that I actually I don't have answers for these questions. Some researchers they believe that AGI is something coming, like it's like 100% we will have AGI with time. Some people they say no, we cannot. Machines cannot be like humans. So the big question, I really don't have an answer about it currently. I don't have beliefs, strong beliefs about it. My impression is currently, in the time being, AI is very far from human being intelligence at this level. Hope this clarified a little bit the difference between the two concepts.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I have one question for Mr. Asim Kagzi, that as long as there is human involvement, can AI really be debiased, or is this only reflecting the bias of the people doing the debiasing? I think it's a very interesting question, so I would like to have your input on this.
Yeah, Olga from Princeton has said, it's difficult to debias human beings than debiasing the programs, right? Um, it cannot be completely taken out, and the reason being, um, there are certain, positive things that you have to do in terms of, using cuss words. Uh, a lot of time in our daily lives we use those words, but we don't do it in front of our children, for example. We don't do it in front of our elders. We don't do it in a business environment, but we use these kind of odd uh, words in a private friendly environment. So when you are talking about, say, chatbots, which is a very invasive, pervasive technology that you see everywhere, you would like to use that bias, but at times you should not, where you are trying to basically, if the decisions are, if you are trying to hire, say, math and science teachers, and since your data shows there is a linkage between women and girl with arts, and man and boy with math and science, then your resume that is coming from a very good candidate happens to be female, she's going to get lower rank. So you have to debias it. So that first is obviously, I'm trying to build on your argument, that whether we actually really need to be debiasing, and the answer is yes or no, depending on the situation. And secondly, uh, uh, it is difficult, but programs are easier to debug than the human brains, right? So
Okay, perfect. If I may ask Mr. Riyaz Sunara one interesting question, that can you let us know some real case studies where AI helps banks for detecting money laundering and KYC, AML and KYC?
See, in money laundering and KYC, this is something where a lot of work is going on, and AI is one of them. So if you look into the applications, a lot of applications now coming in. RegTech Forum is actually based on a lot of analysis, and then basically teaching the machine how to judge what is wrong and what is right. So there is a lot, and I'm sure that Asim can also add also because he's also working, I believe, on something like that as well at HBL. Besides that, you see, the trade-based anti-money laundering has got a lot of peculiarities where it can still be used once you understand the patterns and all those things, how it flows. So yes, AI can play a very big role in the coming months and the years in developing those applications and improving those applications. Thank you.
Asim, would you like to add on something?
yes, thank you, Riyaz Saab. I would give credit to whatever I'm trying. I would say in next minute or so, I would give credit to Hussein Hassan Ali Saab and on Ali, because these are the subject matter experts at HPL especially on audit and trading desk side. Uh, there is a regulation that has come out from State Bank of Pakistan, which is very comprehensive, and it has been studied by the banks, and they are trying to figure out how to best uh, adhere to the regulation. So they have already found out that there are some low-hanging fruits already available. So out they created certain controls, upwards of 60. They have identified around 18 that can be easily automated, whether through algorithmic or programmatic way, and some of the or AI, depending on your affinity to the technology. Some of them are very difficult, so you have to have years of experience and some gut development or intuition about things, and a lot of things fall in between where you can put AI to the work, where algorithmic, at least rule based programming paradigm would not work or would not be a work in maintainable form. So there's a lot of things that you can do to help they put those regulations in place and try to adhere to them.
Okay, perfect.
Dr. Farooq, I just want to add something that there are, softwares in banking, they are available, which are helping in anti-money laundering operations and been used in different, scenarios and different case studies like Asadis. There is an anti-money laundering solution, which has been used by banks, financial institutions, and even the healthcare companies also. So for the banks and other things like this, it has curtailed the time which is being used to detect the frauds and errors and anti-money laundering, which was taking weeks or a day's time, is taking now minutes. That these softwares are helping. Mr. Riaz can highlight more on that one. That these are already implied in so many banks throughout the world.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Asif, for the input. I would like to ask Dr. Nasser one question: what is the significance of AI in the process of digitalization and digital transformation? How do you see that the role of AI can be impactful?
Well, of course, AI is gonna boost digital transformations everywhere. So AI can help automating a lot of procedures and functionalities in any pipeline. And it's just we need to be smart to know when and where to use AI in our digitalization transformation. So not AI can be efficient in some places, but not everywhere. So I would say we just need to be smart in using AI, prioritize the tasks, know what are the priorities for us and where AI can bring a lot of value, so return on investment. Like in the second talk, I've seen a very nice diagram where some blocks were highlighted and AI can help there, and some other blocks, they are of second priority.
Okay, perfect. There is another interesting question that what do you think, although like it's quite subjective and conceptual, but I think that a very pertinent question, that when you are using AI for decision makings and actions, so who would be held responsible for those action and decisions? Is it the algorithm or the human beings behind that algorithm?
Yeah, this is a big question, actually. This is a big challenge. In research, we are tackling this kind of questions. Like, if some crime happened, who is responsible? How to do a digital investigation? Maybe the library has some bug. Maybe the developer had done something wrong. Maybe the data is poisoned. So this is the kind of research questions that we are addressing in
maybe you put the robot in jail.
Yeah, that's a challenging. There's a new word, and we need to adapt actually and find the new procedures and new protocols.
And Asim, I would like to have the feedback from you also on this question.
Um, well, but as Dr. Nasser said, it is difficult, because this is the first time in history. If you look at a few of the books out there, Industry 4.0, and this uh, Sapiens, for the very first time, you are seeing where poli- policy makers are lagging behind the technological advances. Because before this revolution, AI revolution or machine learning revolution, you always used to put policy first and then technology would almost follow. Or if not follow, it will be in tandem. This is the first time technology is doing something that policy makers never intended. So, for example, the way we are talking, you know, I am in Canada. Dr. Nasser is in San Francisco, behind the Golden Gate Bridge, virtually at least. Asif Saab is in UAE. Riaz Saab is in Karachi, most probably, and participants are from all over the place. This thing, if you have to put a monitoring system, for example, how do you do that? Technology is way ahead of policymakers. So again, you have to come up with certain protocols that Dr. Nasser addressed, that you have to come up with these new protocols, new regulations, and do it quickly. And I would say to the policymakers, especially the regulators, that now, because it is all the people who are under your purview are looking towards you to guide them, and you are in the best position to do that. And from financial management perspective, for example, especially in case of Pakistan, State Bank has always been great in terms of helping financial institutions do their level best. We never had financial crisis per se. Even during the worst of financial crisis in the world back in year 2004 or 5. And later on, when the whole thing went down the drain, when the mortgage market meltdown. So, and it never happened in Pakistan. And the reason is a good framework and guidance and regulatory framework that State Bank of Pakistan has put in place. So, what I would request and suggest that in this specific area, regulators like State Bank of Pakistan and the equivalents in other countries should be, our thought leaders and put guidance in place, and then obviously translate into some sort of a regulation.
Mhm. Okay, perfect. Riaz Chonara Saab, do you think that how you are going to curb down the gap between the technological advancement and the policy making?
That's right. You see, in the state bank, what we are now doing, because we have to understand if the typical regulator actually comes with a very conservative background, they don't want much risk. So they want to mitigate their risk as well. Okay. So now what the regulators are coming up with, something known as innovation offices, innovation labs, in which they can actually do such type of project as sandboxing, with close supervision, and then then till the time it's matured. Because you have to understand, we don't have regulations for a lot of things because we don't understand the technology. So I think it's very important first to understand the technology behind it. Obviously, then the regulations can be made. Then the other big issue is actually there are certain jurisdictions now, like State Bank has got some jurisdictions about electronic money or payment systems, but it doesn't have a jurisdiction like over contracts, over settlement of goods and all those things. A lot of things, because now all these things are coming together. So there is a lot of work which SCCP and State Bank is also doing together. at least so far as innovation is concerned. So we probably are coming up with those options, and pretty soon it will be in place. So this is something which we are coming up with things, because we have to understand that a typical regulator will obviously restrict all these things. But now you need somebody else actually to think completely different and say, okay, fine, let's allow, and how we can monitor. But again, there has to be a broad parameters, and then they have to see that which are the areas where the regulations have not been made and which can be improved. So because at the end of the day, the objective of the regulator is to safeguard the interest of the stakeholders, which is very critical for us. And obviously, the if there is any direct loss to the depositors or anybody, so that has to be taken care of. So from that perspective, we have to be a little conservative as well. Thank you.
Okay, one more question is, banks are governed by regulators, right? And would it be fine if policies are superseded by AI systems developed by maybe teams based abroad? So like they do not know the local requirements and compliance framework, but do you think that this would pose serious risk towards compliance and risk assessment and management in that sense? Or do you think that no, it would be flexible and also adaptable towards the local compliance environment?
Okay, first of all, you see, AI in banking is still in a nascent stage. It's not at an advanced stage. So we need to understand that it's still something, a lot of things have to be done. Now, when you are talking about a complete extreme, and those things will come up, because you see, when you build in intelligence, like somebody was telling me that one of the robot is now getting emotional as well, because now he has got intelligence, so he's getting with AI, he's getting even emotional, like humans are doing it. So obviously those things will change, and those things will have to be monitored. But so far as the current status is concerned, probably that will take a couple of years ahead. But at this stage of time, whatever is required is something which we need to work on those things. I think making and understand. So first of all, I think for a regulator to understand how things are done is much more critical than anything else. Because if the regulator does not understand that, how is it going to make regulations? So I think, how can you regulate till the time you don't understand? But yes, there are a couple of things which are actually made to be non-regulated, unregulated. Those are one of the challenges for the government as well as for the regulators.
Okay, Dr. Nasser, I would like to ask one question, that looking at the current state of AI development and advancement, do you think that AI at the moment only assists in decision making, or do you think that it is going beyond that?
Well, definitely AI today is assisting in decision making in a lot of systems, insurance systems, in medicine, in cybersecurity. So more than this, yes, AI can play a bigger role, I guess. We see self-driving cars, we see automated surgery. I guess that we need just to be careful to not give more hype than what is realistic. So it's not a magic solution for everything. Every time we have good data, we have good labeling, we have good algorithms, we do our work correctly and using very testing, extensive testing, and we make sure that we don't have overfitting. Overfitting is a big problem in AI. We don't have biases, right? As Dr. Asim said and discussed. This is a good approach to get benefit from AI nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Asim Saab, do you think that now in retail banking, AI-based decision making is quite impactful? And with that also, I would like to add that another question, that can we say that AI will replace traditional branch banking concept completely?
I will tackle the last portion first because it's easy. We are not looking at replacement because you know, we have to have uh, we have to have human interaction. And the reason is very simple, that the technologies that we have here today, even in North America, they are not there as yet. So thinking in terms of replacement would be a little bit of far-fetched idea, just like generalized artificial intelligence. So we are looking at actually more of a complementary role of AI and machine learning than replacing. So augmenting systems would be more appropriate term to use in that from that in that situation. The first one was a little bit tricky. And I don't have a clear cut, uh, understanding that why retail is any different from, say, any other type of banking. Um, Most of the system in retail, if you think in those terms, have already been automated. So for example, how many times do you really talk to a person when you trying to withdraw money? You always go to ATMs, you don't carry cash a whole lot because you don't need to anymore, because you know that in your neighborhood, if it is safe, then you can go anytime and you can take out the cash. If you want to deposit a check, most of the time your machines can take care of it without interacting with people. I just got an email last week that I can deposit check by taking a picture of the. If I download the app and take a picture of the check, then it will be deposited. So I don't even need to go to ATM now. So those are things that are already in place. Even in Pakistan, you see tons of ATM machines that would work across the networks. So I have a credit card from Canada. I went to Karachi and took the money out from a ATM in defense. So no problems. Systems are online. So I would say retail banking is the more advanced in that aspect. It's more automation than AI, but obviously AI would play its role. For example, hand signature recognition. It can be done from a photo, and you can actually catch very nuances of your signature. So yes, uh, we are already seeing it happening in retail banking.
Okay, perfect. So
Dr. Farooq, just I want to add something like that, Mr. Asim. There's a question was regarding that it is affecting the traditional branch. Yes, it is affecting. I give you an example which is practically happening in UAE. Mashreq Bank have already closed 50% of their branches. Emirates NBD have closed 40% of their branches. The banking has shifted to mobile banking, smartphone banking, and traditional banks and branches are almost closing everywhere in the world. Zand Bank have already been launched in UAE. There's a first digital bank. And there was a question that can automation lead to unemployment in the society? Now, this unemployment and closing of branches and other things, they're affecting in the sense that now the job description is changing everywhere. Anyone who have to secure their job must to know the technical know-how, the fintech and these things. Like today, the common language is English. We communicate with each other in English. The tomorrow and the future language is technology. If you are not aware of the technology, you will be unable to communicate with each other, and you will be unable to secure your job. And automation just have improve, have make this efficiency and burden less and repetitive, all these things. So it has been affecting in if I see that specifically in UAE, technology and this artificial intelligence and fintech have badly affected the traditional banking. They have a great layoff. The branches have been closed on that one, which has been taken over. And Mr. Asim was giving an example. Then you can scan the checks. Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank here is offering this one, that if I want, I can take the advantage. They will give me a system in which whatever check I have collected, I will scan, they will get in their system, and it will be credited into my account. No need to go to any of these machines to deposit or to the counter. Whatever has happened, this pandemic has accelerated all these technological changes, which was supposed to take, I think, maybe 10 years, that we will be adopting these things, that unfortunately or fortunately, it has hit. And to survive and to in this environment, everyone and in their field specifically must have to know how the technological know-how.
Okay,
That's
perfect.
Yeah,
One last
hi,
question.
Farooq. I would like to add something here.
Yes, please.
Yeah, please. Thank you. Yeah, basically, artificial intelligence is a banking weapon against digitalization, cyber threats, compliance, fraud detection, and money laundering. But it doesn't mean that they are free from management is free from their responsibilities. AI used for freeing up banking team from higher value functions. So it doesn't mean that AI will be turn out to be unemployment, or your free robot is now responsible for all the defaults. It's not like that. There will always be challenges with AI integration, and it is important that you have a clean, large data set in the first place. So it's important that they have skilled data scientists on their team who have the business understanding and a clear goal for the project. This is the answer that you were asking with respect to AML and AI, and who is responsible if something goes wrong. So that's what I wanted to add.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I think that we have come to the conclusion of our session. It was a very wonderful session. But before going to the conclusion, I would like to ask our respected speakers to share their thoughts, like one last thought for 1 minute. So please, I will start with Dr. Nasser. So what would you like to conclude, and how would you like to see the future of AI in banking?
Yes, I don't know much about banking, but I think that AI can play a big role in banking. Currently, if I want to manage my money as just a simple customer, I would like to have advice. I would like to have personal assistant, where to invest, how to invest, this kind of questions. Maybe AI can help me manage my situation, not get into deep loan or stuff like that. So I guess AI, of course, is the future. Blockchain is also the future. Blockchain and the AI have a really nice interplay. For example, if we use blockchain, we can trace responsibility as well. If we use smart contracts and we have this ledger of interactions and transactions, so we can know that this party has provided the data and this party has provided the algorithm, and later on we can distribute liability as well. So the future, yeah, I guess that AI and blockchain are there to be seen in the future. And thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Asim, can you please share your last thoughts?
The only thing that comes to my mind right now after all that discussion is, talk to your peers, talk to your friends, and share your information and inputs. That way, we can help each other in terms of making our systems better. Whether it is bias, whether it is security, whether it is privacy, whether it is efficiency. And you would be amazed that how things can turn out to be. Uh, so if you are in HBL, do share your information. I'm not talking about confidential information, your experiences with other bankers, so that they can get some head start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Mr. Riaz Shonara, would love to have your concluding remarks.
Thank you. I think we are not the technologists. We are the bankers or the accountants, which are actually trying to learn what the technologists are doing. But I think we have to understand and see how better it can be utilized in our fields of area. So we have to be abreast, as Asif Saad rightly pointed out, that if we are not there, either we will survive or we'll be out. We'll be dinosaurs then, you know. So it's very important that we learn what is happening
Will be
right now.
Nokia phone or like Black.
That's right.
BlackBerry.
We don't want to be Nokia phone or BlackBerry. We just want to be better geared up for the new technologies. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Asif, please have any last thoughts?
You are talking about me or
Yes.
Asim? Okay,
No,
this.
Mr. Asif.
Yeah. See, this AI will enable bank to leverage human and machine capability optimally to drive operation and cost efficiency. The cost is going down, and there will be more. All of these benefits are no longer, as already told, futuristic to vision to accomplish for the banks. We are now having digital banks will full-fledged having all this AI fintechs, which is all included in fintech blockchains. All things are there. So there is no future. The future is very near. So what I foresee is that one we have to adopt, as Mr. Riaz have already mentioned, that if we are not adopting these technologies, if we are not applying these technologies in our organization, and even we are not getting literate of this education, these technologies, we are out of the game.
Mhm. Okay, Miss Alia, would you like to have some? Would you like to share some thoughts with us?
Yes,
Final
I would like to add to Sir Asif that future is not near, future is here. So we have to act now, or otherwise we will be out of the game. That's what I would like to say.
Mhm. Okay, perfect. I hope that all of us have enjoyed this session. I personally pretty much enjoyed every presentation and also Q&A session. And there are few questions still hanging due to time constraint. I'm unable to basically take them up now. But I really encourage those participants who ask these questions that you can send us those questions, and then we will be able to contact our respected speakers. They are quite generous, so they will be able to answer those questions at their convenience, and then we can come back to them. Second thing is, I have seen that some of the participants are facing some problem with the feedback form because SBP, due to security restrictions, I think that you can go back home and then you can log on to the network and fill in the form. Really appreciate that. And with that, I think I conclude this session. I hope you enjoyed it. Jazakallah khaira, and thank you so much for participating in it and making it a very great session and successful. Fi amanallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.